Nice to see you all. I'm CCP Kalira, better known as CCP Coin. I'm going to be talking about the opening the economy with blockchain. So we're going to start by going over just where we are, how the setup is right now, and where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And what differentiates eFrontier from almost any other game, specifically MMO and EVE Online, is that eFrontier has a blockchain integration. And since we're talking about open economy, we need to talk about the act of opening the economy, and we will do that through blockchain. So the focus of this will be essentially the economic impact of introducing blockchain. But first we're going to do some groundwork. Now, currently we have a closed economy, and for an MMO, that means that we have a currency loop, resource distribution, production, destruction, and hopefully sometime secular technology growth, which essentially means that we have an endogenous mean to increase the efficiency of actions in the game. That's what I personally would like to make happen. And now we have like a very, very general definition of an open economy, where we have imports, exports, capital movements, labor movements, and exchange rates. This is essentially the generalized version of what is necessary for an open economy. But it's not directly applicable to a virtual world like eFrontier, and we will dive into that later. And this is you can see that I'm a graphic designer, proudly so. But yeah, so we go through the blockchain to open economy. But that doesn't mean that the blockchain doesn't interact with the game when it's a closed economy. But it means that it becomes infinitely more important when we open economy because we do it through or via a blockchain. So a little background. This is how the loop is. You need to acquire currency. You need to buy a lens, get crude, make fuel. Then you need to perform some actions, or you can choose. But preferably you perform some action on the frontier, whether it be mining, exploring, PvP, PvE. And then you can get feral data if you're lucky. And then you sell the yield. And then you have acquired currency and you're back to the starting point. If you're selling feral data, then there's new money flowing in to the game. And this is the core loop. The fun part is, economics is very canny with taking extremely fun things and making them look boring with a list. But this is essentially how you would write it up. And so currently we have a setup or a plan for the open economy framework. If any of you saw the stream we did on the economy, we went through essentially the whole plan, why we're doing it like this. And if you haven't seen it, it was recorded. So the plan is to have a pseudo-dual currency system with a hybrid lens pricing. That means just that we have two currencies. We have an in-game currency, which is off-chain, and an on-chain currency. There is I say a slow crawling peg, but that in the short term, that means a fixed exchange rate, but means you can have a deterministic path. But for all intents and purposes, you can think of it as a fixed exchange rate. And all the prices of new lenses is denominated in EVE tokens, or the on-chain currency. But there's a ceiling. So if the token valuation spikes, the barrier to entry won't spike with it. We have a cap on the barrier to entry. And the lenses serve as the primary sink, and failed data is the main faucet. This closes the loop. This is extremely simple, almost as simple as you can get. And these are, I mean, the simplicity was an intended goal, because human behavior, or emergent human behavior, is extremely complex. And if you played Conway's Game of Life, you know how simple rules can create extremely complex behaviors. So complex behaviors on complex systems becomes unmanageable. So to keep it manageable, we have the system as simple as possible. So this lowers the barrier to entry, promotes transparency, maintains mission conformity. Mission conformity is pretty important in my view. It means that our promises to decentralize, which we're doing, for example, with the open sourcing, and then with the blockchain, this is conforms to that view or plan, vision. And the last one is time inconsistency, which is it's not very well known, but it's the main reason why central banks exist, because it has to do with how incentives are constant over time, essentially. So if I promise I will do something in the future, but you know my incentives at that time will never be the same as when I made the promise, you can't trust my promise. So governments have generally promised that we're going to get down inflation and we're going to make everyone rich, unemployment low. But when they should stand by that promise, they tend to inflate a lot. So hyperinflation almost always from governments, not the central bank. But the central bank has a single mandate, or many of them, almost all now, which is inflation targeting. And so there you have time consistency. But we want to eliminate time inconsistency so people can trust what we say. This is the diagram, again, graphic designer, that I made for the loops. And I went over this on stream. This is a very simplified version of what's happening in the game. And then I accidentally made this handsome Squidward skull around the open economy part of it. I was extremely unreasonably proud of this skull, so I kept it in. And so yeah, this is the open economy part, and this is what we're going to focus on today. But it's very easy to say the words open economy, but it's extremely difficult to think about it in a concrete way for a virtual world where there's like a physics barrier between our world and the virtual world. Because in general, when you think about open economy, it's pretty simple. It's just goods flowing between countries. The borders are pretty well defined. And a good in one place is generally usable in another place. This is not the case for eFrontier. It's very difficult to buy bread as a character in eFrontier. So we need to think carefully about this. For example, we need to think about what is flowing. In what sense is it an open economy? And there are some ideas of definitions, like the classic one is the national accounts use by residency. That is, yeah, okay, so we'll talk about it later. So, and then we can just say, okay, players, they are domestics, non-players are foreign, or we can think about it in terms of currency flows. The origin, like with what currency was an item bought. I maintain that the standard national accounts is clearly nonsensical. We can't define it by residency in any way. It would be extremely strange. Then we have like a world within the frontier where you count different types of open economies. You would probably have as many open economies as you have countries in the world. But then we can think of player versus non-player definition. But you get in some kind of trouble there, because let's say two players are interacting outside the frontier. Is that domestic production and domestic sales? So we can't just go strictly by players and non-players. And you have to also think about what is actually flowing. A non-player would buy what from a e-frontier player? It's not a lot of things inside the virtual world that is very usable outside the virtual world. So we wouldn't have nx equal to 0, which is net exports. And we essentially need there to be a condition where net exports is 0. Otherwise, we don't have an equilibrium. No models that we create aren't solvable, and we can't make good decisions. Then we can think about the currency flow. So then we start to get a little hairy about if the character in the game and the human controller, were they the same economic entity or not. Because, of course, you can have many accounts. And you can also have a non-player that never goes into the game, that holds an on-chain currency, trades with another person that has nothing to do with the frontier, and we are going to count that as domestic trading. So you can see right away it becomes, it's not trivial to do this. But so probably the best way to do it right now is to combine the player with non-player and currency flow. So you have to be a player, you would assign it to a value to the wallet, and the definition would be something like a foreign trader is a transfer of value to or from a wallet connected to a smart character of e-frontier, involving an exchange between EVE and another currency. The problem here is, for example, how do you, let's say I'm a programmer and I write a smart contract for a smart storage unit. I sell it to a person who brings it into e-frontier. How should we account for that? So we are not capturing everything with this definition. And I'm not 100% sure there exists a definition we'll all be very happy about. But you could think of it like, from a modeling perspective, you could think of it like a technology shock. It's like a programmer born in Turkmenistan who learned to code, moves to Iceland, and brings his knowledge with him. That's probably the way we need to model it. So this is non-trivial, but this is extremely important, and we need to think very hard about this. And we need to base our decisions on models, and the models need to be consistent. But when we think about this open economy, then the act of opening the economy has to do with the blockchain. That's the pipe here. But what I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation about is what does this pipe bring us more generally. It acts as a record keeper, constitution, law enforcer, and a constraint on monetary authorities. And it lowers transaction costs in trading in the open economy sense. So foreign trading has a lower transaction cost. So these are the fundamental features I want to focus on. But the big one here that we want to focus on especially is trust and resilience. And I think resilience is probably the biggest one here. So as a constitution, this is extremely important, but very difficult to set up correctly in practice. In Iceland, we have a movement that's been going on for like, what's it now, 20 years, demanding a new constitution. And these are the base rules everyone is playing with, and the blockchain can help us there. So the problem here is that we have, for example, in a virtual world, we have people with very different preferences, very different norms. And in some cultures, for example, usury or interest rates is considered a sin, and has been considered a sin actually in almost all cultures. So it's not trivial how players will, this is like a coordination problem. Players need to sit down, it's very difficult, write the constitution. How laws should be determined, what laws should be determined, how to enforce them, and what's the punishment. This is, for EVE Online players, probably know this is not written down anywhere. This is like unwritten rules, mostly depending on reputation. But the blockchain can help us here. It implicitly defines the property rights, the ownership of a thing, defines what you can trade and how you can trade it. And I think the most important here is that there are no exceptions. It's programmable. There's no discretion. And hard-coded, I say, but I mean it's hard-coded in the sense that it's programmable and it's written down, and you can't change it. You need to fork it, or it's extremely costly to change this, which is good. You want the constitution to be extremely costly to change. Otherwise, it doesn't function as a constitution. And the enforcer part, which is very important, you can't have rules without enforcement, rules without enforcement aren't really rules, they are soft guidelines. And this has been historically an extremely difficult problem, and why, for example, financial systems are usually very weak, have been weak for many thousands of years. I mean, we don't even know how to do it correctly in the real world. We had a crisis in 2008. So this isn't a solved problem. It's an extremely difficult problem, and it's even more difficult in a virtual world. Now, I say relies on trust, but it's more like people are putting their faith in someone rather than trust. Trust, you could say trust, but I think trust, systemic trust, is a different kind of beast. Now you have to put your faith in a person or a collection of people. And there's also a problem of expectations, because when you're making time-dependent arrangements, you want to know if the same laws hold after 12 months, 2 years, 3 months. And if you're wronged, there's nothing you can do about it. Well, you can cry to your tribe, say, actually there was a guy that was wronged in the frontier, and the payment to a smart gate was his corpse. So you can do that kind of thing, where you can't use the smart gate, so you bring the corpse of the guy that wronged you. And this also, like, from a financial system point of view, this is a risk premium, and it creates a non-intersecting willingness to pay and willingness to accept. And if you have a non-intersecting VTP and VTA, no trade occurs, essentially. What the lender wants and what the borrower wants don't intersect, so no trade will happen, and you can't have a. So in EVE Online, reputation and trust is essentially what decreases the risk premium, which allows trades to happen. And as soon as that trust evaporates, the system collapses. So in the blockchain yields, you can have the smart contracts are the soul of the system. There's no contract violation. If the inputs are correct, the output will be correct. You don't need to hope that the smart contract will execute it correctly. There are no unconstitutional contracts, and this is trust by automation. We don't need to put our faith in anyone. So here I'm going to talk about, it's not just me talking, but I'm not stating things randomly. This is a very simplified version of a basic problem, which is the principal-agent problem. And you have an agent that puts some effort into something, which costs him something, and he's paid up front by a principal, which gains gains are here, there's some returns, but his cost is the wages or the initial endowment that went to the agent. And if you look at these two equations, you can see that if this is chosen beforehand, the agent will never put any effort into anything. He will only lower his utility. I want to say this is simplified in the sense that there are two other conditions that need to be there, but I'm not going to get into the details of these kind of problems right now. But the thing here is that this will never work. The agent will always shirk. He will not do the job he was hired to do or what he proposed to the principal that he was going to do. And this is very general setup. This can be a worker, this can be a lender, investment, whatever. So in the standard literature, you add collateral. And as soon as you add collateral, you can find a collateral that makes both agents. So the principal knows, and just to say that what happens is that this instance is that the principal will never suggest anything. He will just say, refuse every offer, because you can't trust the agent. So what happens is not that you will get constant betrayal, you will simply get no transactions. Essentially, a final system that falls down. Here, when you add collateral, you immediately can find a collateral which makes both the principal and the agent happy. And this is extremely difficult in a virtual world, for example, because you can't enforce how you're going to enforce this. And the collateral, how you're going to do it. So usually you want collateral because if you want a loan, for example, that which you are using as collateral is something you're going to use in the project. In the current system, you would have to give away the thing which you need to fulfill this agreement. So we need a way, somehow, to write a contract that is contingent on something happening, and then the collateral will be transferred over. But I'm not talking about this because I'm fascinated by collateral. I'm just saying these kind of details really matter, and if they are not implementable, you will never get this kind of system, or it's extremely difficult. You will need a reputation system. And reputation systems are historically extremely weak. But with a blockchain, for example, you can make these kind of contracts, and you can make all kinds of services. There has been, like, know that there was a hackathon where people created insurance services. And then you can, of course, have a contingency of if this is destroyed, this is verifiably destroyed, then you can transfer something to them. This is extremely difficult, and this is a reputation-based business without blockchain. So essentially, what we're doing with the blockchain is we're speedrunning institutional trust. There was the Nobel Prize, I think it was last year, Acemoglu and et al. They were talking about or they won the prize for talking about the importance of institutions. And the institutions here, the importance comes from essentially trust and how they operate. So it takes a long, long, long time to get these institutions up and running, extremely long time. And the infrastructure to make them work and work together. With the blockchain, we are attempting to speed run this institutional trust by having trust by automation. Mutable rules, trustless execution, digital bearer assets, and verifiable ownership, which enables, and this is not an exhaustive list, it's an example of banking, collateralized lending. I am extremely, I'm looking forward to yield curves. I really like yield curves. They contain a lot of information about the future. And you can't get yield curves if you don't have a very complicated, or not complicated, non-primal lending system. And coordinated long-term economic planning. That's essentially what they're talking about in the Nobel Prize winning papers, is what kind of system can you set up so coordinated long-term economic planning is a viable thing. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the lessons. I'm not very well versed in the history of EVE Online, but I actually knew about this one. I read about it a long time ago, and I thought it was extremely interesting. That was the EVE Bank. What was interesting was, firstly, how long it ran. I think it was like 5 years or something. And it acted like a bank, which is essentially maturity transformation, which is borrowing short-term and lending out long-term. But that was reputation-based. Just because it worked for a long time, everybody believed it was going to work for an even longer time. But it was difficult to, because it's reputation-based, you can't have like a change in management, because the reputation is completely based on the management. So, and it's very hard to decentralize power. But as soon as something happens, it collapses. So this user player called, what was it? Riddick, I think. He just extracted everything, said it was to pay medical bills, who knows, and the system collapsed. And hasn't, I think, nothing similar to this has come to light again, because it's just extremely difficult to trust, especially in a game like EVE Online, where backstabbing is almost encouraged. So we have another one. It's was a user called Darkness with an escrow service, and he ran it for some time, and large transactions went through him, because when two people meet, who's going to put? Are you going to give me the money first or the goods first? Kind of bad guy standoff type of situation. Darkness said, "Okay, don't worry, I'll be the middleman." And then he was getting tired of the game, I think, and or thought, I'm not getting paid enough for this. So he just took the money and ran. And the big thing here, I think, is that this is not a scalable business in EVE Online. While escrow is a pretty simple thing with a blockchain. It's extremely scalable. So it's not only the trust part, it's how do you scale trust. And with an escrow service, with a blockchain, you can scale trust. Then was the war bonds. That was actually pretty successful. This is not like a example of something bad happening. But I do think what it shows is that it requires that your viewpoints align with the viewpoints of those you are doing business with. But I can guarantee you that when you go to a bank to finance your house, getting a mortgage, you're not asking him, do you vote for this person? Do you have the same preferences that I have? But in this case, because they thought their goal was a good goal, they were willing to lend. And also, this creates an implicit inequality, because it means that only the elites have access to this kind of things. And but I thought it was very fun to read up on it. And also, it shows there's demand for this. I mean, this is something that just all these examples actually show that there's demand for this. Because when I was researching this, there were a lot of different examples of people trying to do this. So EVE Online players have been trying to make this work for a long time. It's just an extremely difficult problem. It's almost impossible without some kind of a automated system or a coordinated effort. And you have to have it trust-based, put your faith in someone. And I really like this quote at the bottom, that if the system you're designing depends on the right man, especially if it's on the right time, it's a terrible system. It's not a good system. So, by integrated blockchain, using this constitutional argument and the enforcement argument, we can get a reliable time-dependent arrangement system. And this is, I think, has a domino effect, because as soon as you establish this kind of thing, the possibility is almost endless. Like all kinds of derivative contracts, and also you can have non-players or lapsed EVE players who just want to invest. Just want to, my friend is doing an operation, and I'm going to be lending him money. He's just going to be a financier. So you have this all like this increased depth, and also for a game that is essentially a dominance game, is a geographical dominance game. This introduces like a new dimension of dominance of time, essentially. Money over time. One little example of how difficult this is. Hammurabi, I don't know if you know about him, 18th century before BCE. He wrote tablets because he was trying to coordinate his people in this some financial services. Interest rates, of course, capped. That's a very typical thing. It's actually, if you read newspapers today, there are people that want interest caps. Probably some of you here want interest rates to be capped. Extreme punishment for defaults. And if you think, why would there be an extreme punishment? It's because it's extremely difficult to enforce. So making it very costly to be caught, you have to have the punishment extremely severe. So it's basically your life was ruined. Seizure of land, slavery, execution. Also, not everyone could get it. It was very unequal by design. And this is very similar to EVE Online. There is, when you have reputation-based systems, you get picked by other things than merit. And the enforcement, because, I mean, transportation was not very advanced. It was very costly to enforce, so it was central, local, and expensive. If you compare this to a blockchain type of system, then you have a decentralized, equal by design, proportional punishment, low transaction cost, and enforcement is automatic. And you get this ChatGPT graphic I made. Very difficult to put the triangle inside everything, but I mean, I'm not hired to be a graphical designer. That's good. For you guys, at least. So if you have trust, which is built on immutable rules and trustless execution, you can have asset ownership also and fungible tokens. Then, on top of that, you get banking function and a functioning financial system. And your imagination is essentially the limit here. So this is, the blockchain system allows these, it's like, it increases depth. So even though it's coded automatic, it might feel like it's a constraint. It's actually less of a constraint than the reputation system. And the EVE Online, by its very nature, creates these, or CCP games in general, create this emergent human behavior, this drama. But the blockchain expands this. You can have all kinds of types of interaction. You can finance a politician, you can finance wars, you can start a business that requires a lot of upfront capital. You don't own it. You promise the next 2 years of your life, and I'm gonna make this work. So scalability here is extremely important, resilience and depth. And hopefully, what I'm hoping is in a virtual world like eFrontier, with the good functioning financial system, you will get novel institutions that you simply can't get in the real world. And that is my hope. Thank you. I don't know if there's any questions, a few questions, if you want. All right, thank you.
CCP Killera, everyone, well done. So do feel free to stick around. We've got another presentation starting in about 10 minutes, and that one's on the EveNet. So yeah, stay tuned.